And then, you know, as people come in,
you can let your kitty in.
well, that's okay. That's all right. You know, one of the things that I cannot stand with this is that I can't see. We had this problem at Crotona as well, is that the screen goes full. 1 minute. All right, let me get the cat, of course, because he's scratching the screen.
Jason, how are you feeling?
I'm fine, thanks.
Good, good. You know, you and I have both been struggling with allergies.
Yeah, they've been pretty bad.
Yeah. We all have sexy voices.
And a lot of sneezy.
And my eyes are the things that are really driving me crazy. Itchy, itchy, itchy.
Any single day, I'm one of the 7 dwarfs. Sneezy, honey, coffee.
Okay, so as the notice had said, we are going to talk about braiding sweetgrass, and I've done a very, very short presentation on this. What I did is I ended up picking up some of the things that spoke to me. And for those of you who have read the book, I know that there's a number of things that are speaking to you. So I don't want to take up the whole time, you know, just talking about what spoke to me. So I'd like to be able to have this be an interactive webinar. So I'm just going to get started on some of the things that, that stuck out for me. So, one of the things that I thought was beautiful about the book was that Braiding Sweetgrass is basically about Robin Kimmerer's background as a scientist, but also her background as a Potawatomi indigenous woman, as well as her gift as a storyteller. So she braided together these 3 aspects of her life. And if you have not read the book, you know, just pick up a copy of it. You can open it almost anywhere, and every story has a message to it. The part that I would like to talk about more than anything else is the spirit behind our connection with Mother Earth. But it was so sweet to understand that sweetgrass, wingash, is considered the holy grass. And in the creation story for the Anishinaabe and the Potawatomi, and the creation story that she talks about, it was one of the first plants that was planted on Turtle Island, which is what the indigenous call Mother Earth. And so wingash, or sweetgrass, is considered the sweet smelling hair of Mother Earth, which I just thought was lovely. And her quote is, "Breathe it in and you start to remember things you didn't know you had forgotten." So one of the beautiful things about sweetgrass is that it's used as a way to smudge and purify people, your living room. You know, you can burn it as a way to start ceremony. And it is just, it's one of those scents that you smell and suddenly you feel like that you are in, you're just in the womb of Mother Earth. It's just beautiful. And it is considered one of the 4 sacred herbs by the Native Americans for smudging. They also make baskets from sweetgrass. They use it in ceremony, and they also use it for ceremonial use. So I'd like to talk about the creation story. This has always been such an amazing thing for me, because I think creation stories set the tone of who we are and where we come from and what our purpose is in life. The creation story for the Native Americans is very, very different than the Judeo-Christian creation story that we have of Adam and Eve. You know, many people say that, many women especially feel that Eve kind of got the short end of the stick. And even Robin Kimmerer mentions this in her book, which I thought was very, very interesting. But for the Native Americans, the creation story is very, very important because it sets the tone of being one with the earth and not looking at Mother Earth as something that is separate from ourselves, but that we are considered more of the younger brethren of the earth versus the higher species. And one of the quotes that Robin mentions is that we must look to other species for guidance because their wisdom is apparent in the way that they live. The creation story for Sky Woman Falling, in fact, this is the illustration that she puts in her book by Bruce King. And I'm not sure how well you can see it, but she's on the wings of the geese. She flies in from the sky.
That's why I was so upset about the geese being killed.
She flies in, you know, from being held.
Remember when they killed them all in the Napa?
And she's brought in and greeted by all the different creatures that are in, you know, that are there on Turtle Island. And they realize that, you know, she's brought these seeds of sustenance and so forth to be able to start the Turtle Island and to start the process of bringing humans into Turtle Island. And one of the quotes that Robin Kimmerer mentions is, like creation stories everywhere, cosmologies are a source of identity and orientation to the world. They tell us who we are. And through this creation story of Sky Woman Falling, you realize that these other beings want to be able to help Sky Woman when she's coming to Turtle Island with these seeds and the sustenance and so forth. They want to work in union with her. It's not that she comes and says, okay, this is what you're going to do. And in this image, she's pregnant, and she's pregnant with her own new life. So she's bringing life to Turtle Island, and she's bringing life for the human beings as well. So, like I said, Sky Woman sowed seeds of sustenance for the body and also for the mind, emotion, and spirit. She was leaving us teachers. The plants can tell us her story. We need to learn to listen. And this is, I just found this so interesting because when you do spend some time in nature, nature has its own language, and nature will tell you the secrets that, you know, are there. So 3 concepts that I felt were very, very interesting and very necessary are reciprocity, receptivity, and respect. So reciprocity is the practice of exchanging things with others for mutual benefit. We do reciprocity, but we often do. I'm just wanting to reiterate or remind everyone that if you're not speaking, could you please mute your computer, because otherwise we have a feedback loop. So reciprocity is something that, you know, it's not something that we're born with. We're not, it's not a practice that we are constantly told that we need to do. But in the Native American tradition and some other cultures, reciprocity is something that is integral to their culture. You know, that you always make sure that you give back in some way. The other quality is receptivity, and that's being able to listen and to accept new ideas and suggestions. And I don't think that we can have respect for Mother Earth or for each other if we don't have receptivity. And without respect, we're lost, because it's until that we can respect the earth and the planet. And we're watching that right now. We're seeing how crucial it is that we respect the planet, because we're having climate change. You know, there are states like California that are struggling with the whole water situation. So Robin writes, for all of us, becoming indigenous to a place means living as if your children's future mattered, to take care of the land as if our lives, both material and spiritual, depended on it. One of the things that I love about the indigenous culture is the fact that they don't think about the present. They're thinking about 7 generations ahead, which, you know, I remember commercials, and I'm sure many of you do, with the Native American who has a tear running down his face because we were throwing garbage on the side of the road and just desecrating the planet with our garbage. And how we were not really thinking about what happens in the future. But now the idea about thinking about what happens later on is becoming part of our thinking process. It's become something that we really are becoming more aware of. And I love this quote because this is so very, very true. So think of Mother Earth like a grandmother who bakes you cookies. And we've all had a grandmother or somebody in our life that has taken care of us and given us something that is so wonderful. And we love that person immensely. And she says, you wouldn't dream of breaking into your grandmother's pantry and taking all the cookies without invitation. Your grandmother would be heartbroken and not inclined to bake more cookies for you anytime soon. So we also need to extend these good manners to the natural world. We never should be taking more than we need, and we should never be taking without asking. The other part of it is understanding that Yahweh, which is the beingness of everything around us, that there's a consciousness in everything around us. There is a consciousness in the stones. There's a consciousness in the plants, in the mineral world, in the animal world. There's consciousness in the air. You know, one of the things that I love is the thunder being songs, because the Native Americans talk about, you know, the thunder beings. Now, the thunder beings are not only the birds that come and you can hear their wings when they flap. It sounds a little bit like thunder, but it's also those beings that bring rain. You know, they come and they walk across the sky and they sound like they're marching when the thunder comes. Everything within the Native American teaching, everything has life, everything has beingness, it has Yahweh. I love this diagram. This is the Windigo. This is a Native American drawing of the Windigo. And the Windigo culture is the part of us that is never able to be satiated. And if you look in the picture, he's got 2 fish in his stomach already, and he's still eating another one. So it's this inability to eat and just be satiated and say, okay, that's enough. We don't need any more. So the Windigo are never able to be satiated. They have no regard for how much is taken. They just take more than they need. They have no respect for other beings. They just eat everything up and leave nothing for other beings. And they don't give anything in return. So the Windigo is sort of the thing that consumes everything. Kind of like ourselves, it has a heart of ice. Doesn't really have any feeling. It's that they lack the reciprocity. They lack heart. They lack the sense of that. Oh, I need to take care of you. You know, I need to make sure that you have enough as well. So the Windigo name is for that thing that lies within us, that cares more about its own survival than anything else. Everything that's in quotes on here is from the book. These are quotes from Robin's book. And the Windigo are not born, they're made. We're not born selfish. In fact, if you look at children, children are always willing to share. You know, they're always willing to give. I remember one time my son, immediately, my daughter, I bought them both the drinks, and my daughter, it was some kind of fruity drink, and my daughter didn't like hers. So immediately my son handed his over and said, here, Hannah, you can have some too. You know, I mean, he just didn't think about it. Small children don't think about giving to other people. But we create this sense of selfishness in our world by feeling that we don't have enough. And the more the Windigo eats, the more ravenous it becomes. So the more we consume, the more that we keep on consuming even more. It shrieks with its craving, its mind a torture of unmet want. Consumed by consumption, it lays waste to humankind. And it lays waste to other kinds of beings as well. I mean, and we're watching that now because the patterns of the weather are changing. We're not getting rain in certain areas where rain came before. But the Windigo myth is something that was designed, they say, by Native Americans to strengthen self-discipline, to build resistance against the insidious germ of taking too much, which I just thought was lovely, because the earth is not looked at as something that is just an object. It's looked at as a living being. So we need to make sure that we don't take more than what we need. There's a beautiful story about the three sisters. And the three sisters are Corn, who's the older sister, Beans, who's the middle sister, and Squash, who's the youngest. And there's a reason that this whole thing is, she uses these plants. She talks about the three sister garden. The three sister garden never competes with each other. They cooperate. So Corn, which is tall and, you know, grows up, the Beans, which is the middle sister, the Corn stands tall, and the Beans sort of wrap themselves around the Corn to be able to grow up. And then the Squash grows lower to the earth, and it helps maintain the moisture in the earth. And all three of them cooperate with each other. And as the Beans also, or no, it's the Squash. The Squash has a prickly type of leaf. So what it does is it deters any of the insects from eating the other plants. So Robin writes, the message of the three sisters is that they respect one another, they support one another, they bring your gift to the world and they receive other gifts. And if we could do this, there'd be enough for all. She also writes that the three sister garden yields more food than if you grew all the sisters alone, because they cooperate with each other. And we know this. We know that there's more power in the power of group versus trying to do something individually. But we tend to be raised in a culture that is so individualistic, especially in the United States. You know, we go to other cultures and they're collective, and we just don't understand why people don't, you know, live individualistically. They sort of, everybody thinks about the family first. In fact, it's one of the problems that's happening in other cultures that used to be collective, that many of the younger people are moving away. So there's nobody there to take care of the elders. But it's an example of what happens, you know, when we don't work together. Then things don't, not everything grows and you know, profits by the fact that there's this collectiveness. So one of the ways that we can be able to take care of our planet is by walking in beauty. And walking in beauty, which is when we can be a whole human being who finds a beautiful path. So it's that whole thing of being aware of what is our heart telling us? What is our gut telling us? Being in touch with our bodies, being in touch with what we put into our body, being in touch with our planet, the food that we eat, the words that we say, the thoughts that we think. It's also living by the gift exchange versus a commodity. There's a beautiful chapter in there all about gift giving. Native Americans are very much about giveaway. There's this whole ceremony that they have where people bring something either that they've made. A lot of times people buy something for the giveaway ceremony. But the giveaway ceremony originally was when you have too much of something and you're not really using it anymore, or it's very, very dear to you, so you make sure that you give it away to someone. So you never hold anything too tightly. You never give something that's broken. You never give something that's not usable. But you know, a lot of times we have more things than we need. So they'll have a giveaway. In fact, I noticed that we do this here at Crotona as well. We have people who come and go. Like I said, I live in Carol's old house, which wasn't Carol's old house. It was somebody else's house and somebody else's house. But each time we leave a little bit of ourselves behind, and so that the new person who comes in to that house can use it. You know, so I think I had a couple of blankets that were left here by the previous person, you know, and Susan has a couple of things that were left from the people who lived in her house, not owned her house. But each time, and people are allowed to come, and you know, whatever's left behind, there's a giveaway, which I think is lovely because there's always a little bit of energy that gets passed on from the previous renter or the person who lived there. Susan moved into a lady, the woman who lived there before, she used to collect teapots. So she left the teapots behind. So, you know, there was this giveaway and I went over there and I ended up picking up one of her teapots. And I thought, you know what, then I'll always have that woman's energy with me, which I thought was that was nice. So Robin writes, we tend to respond to nature as part of ourselves, not as a stranger or alien available for, oh, I'm sorry, this is a quote from Lewis Hyde, who wrote The Gift. And he talks about the gift exchange as that we tend to respond to nature as part of ourselves, not as a stranger or alien available for exploitation. Gift exchange is the commerce of choice. For it is commerce that harmonizes with and participates in the process of nature's increase. Now, when we live by a commodity exchange, we're reaping the earth for everything that it has, instead of doing something where it's a balanced kind of commodity. And, you know, it's funny, I went back and looked at a review on Lewis Hyde's book. It is one of the biggest, it has one of the largest amounts of sales during Christmas time. People end up, who love Lewis Hyde, end up giving that book as a gift to other people. Some of the ways that I was thinking about with regard to gift exchange is to make sure that we provide gifts to the planet, like not putting invasive plants where there should be native ones. In many of our gardens, we put in invasive plants. In fact, I just did this whole project at my house in Chicago where we took out all the invasive plants and ended up planting bloodroot. And I've got a whole backyard full of May-apples and just wild ginger and so forth. But what happens is when you put more native plants in, generally the whole area just seems to harmonize itself better than if you've got invasive plants living in the garden. And one of the other things that Robin talks about is making sure that if you ever go anywhere, you know, make sure that you leave the place better than when you found it. There's a lot of places that are natural places to walk through, like when you go see the redwoods, and one of the signs they have is leave only footprints. Don't bring in your garbage, don't leave your garbage there, that kind of thing. She also talks about when you go camping, you know, and you use up the firewood, replace the firewood for other people. So always leaving a place better than when you found it. I remember one time when we went to go harvest willows for a sweat lodge. We went to this area and we were given permission to be able to use the land. There was a whole ceremony that they did with the tobacco and asking for permission and so forth. But one of the things that I noticed is that there was so much garbage on the land where the willows were. So the first thing I started doing is picking up the garbage. And we went and got some, we found a receptacle, we found some garbage bags, and we ended up picking up the place, and we left it better than when we found it. At least it was clean. And then we ended up harvesting the willows. So Thomas Berry writes about seeing the world as a collection of beings, not as a collection of objects. And I think that if we had this whole understanding of Yahweh, much like we do in the Theosophical Society, we look at everything that had, we say that everything has consciousness. Theosophy does the same thing. But if we could see everything as having its own life, instead of feeling that that life belongs to us, you know, I think that we'd live in a very, very different way. I used to get laughed at by my neighbors because one of the things I did after it rained is I would pick all the earthworms up and put them back in the grass so that we didn't run them over. And I know that there's a lot of people out there that do that, which I think is just, the life matters to the earthworms. Life matters to the starfish. And taking the life of another being is a lot more difficult when we think of them as a who versus an it. So this is a whole other thing about changing the language and seeing, you know, seeing ants on the ground as having a purpose. Seeing the fish in the water as having a purpose. Everything has a purpose. It's here for some reason. And we don't really have, if we look at them as part of our family, we would think twice about just, you know, stepping on the ants or killing a spider or something like that. So one of the things that I think is important is if we lived life as ceremony, looking at the sacred constantly. One of the quotes that I loved from the book was, "The land knows you even when you are lost." How can you ever be lost? Because you're on Mother Earth. She knows who you are. You come from her. You know, we are part of everything that is around us. And granted, it is easier said than done. You know, there are some of us who are directionally challenged, as I am. My brother can tell you that because he knows everything like the back of his hand, and I always get turned around. But that whole feeling of feeling lost, whether it's emotionally feeling lost or it's mentally feeling lost, even physically feeling lost, all we need to do is just take a breath and realize that we're still held. We're still held by Mother Earth. We are really never lost because the land always knows who we are. Ceremony is a wonderful way to live life because it marries the mundane to the sacred. And ceremonies, large and small, have the power to focus our attention to a way of living, to awake in the world. I mean, we've got this whole woke movement right now, but ceremony moves us into a higher, sort of a higher consciousness when we're doing ceremony, because the mundane world just melts away. Anyone who's done Sweat Lodge can tell you that. You go in as one being and you come out and you're just different. Ceremony is a gift from Creator or the divine. I know that there's a lot of people out there that end up charging for Sweat Lodge. They charge for healings. They charge for, you know, sitting with an elder to get some wisdom. And And there are some who are making bucket loads of money by doing sweat lodge. And one of the things that I've always been told by all the elders that I have met, and Robin, you know, she reemphasizes this in her book, ceremony is not something that you ever pay for. You should never pay for ceremony. People should never charge for ceremony. She also talks about an elder who never pays for sweetgrass. Sweetgrass comes from the earth. It's from the divine. We should never have to pay for something that God has given us. When we do ceremony, we can't go wrong when it comes from the heart. Herb, who's my elder, my Potawatomi elder, Elaine's husband, has always, I remember when we started doing sweat lodge together, or I started doing the fire, making the medicine fire ceremony, doing the fire for the medicine. I used to say, well, do I do it like this or do I do it like that? And he'd look at me and he'd say, it doesn't matter how you do it from the heart, you know. Or I would be learning a song, and I'd say, how do you say this? And he says, don't worry about how you say it. Just listen to the sound, sing from the heart. And as you do that more and more, then you start really being able to do it truly from the heart in the right way. Not that there's anything wrong, but you start hearing the words a little differently because you're hearing it from the heart. You start really connecting with what you're doing when you're doing ceremony, and you do it from the heart. And then you know there's no wrong, and it just feels right. I mean, it feels right within you. And we can always create our own ceremony. We don't really need to do something based on what somebody else is doing. We can create ceremony in our own life every day. Giving thanks to the sun as the sun is rising. Giving thanks to the tea that we drink every morning. To the people who've picked that tea, the people who've transported the tea, you know. We can give thanks to the fact that our kitties wake us up in the morning. There's always a ceremony that we can create every moment of our life, if we're just aware that we do it. The one thing that we always need is gratitude. It's waking up and feeling grateful for that breath that we're taking the first moment that we're opening our eyes. And to follow the law of honorable harvest. And this was something that I absolutely loved from the book, was honorable harvest. It's take only what is given, use it well, be grateful for the gift, reciprocate. And one of the ending quotes here is, one of our responsibilities as human people. And I love the fact that she says human people, because there's other people too. There's the tree, there's the standing people who are the trees, the two-leggeds who are the birds, you know, just the four-legged who are our dogs, and anyone who's got four legs. As human people, is to find ways to enter into reciprocity with the more than human world. We can do it through gratitude, through ceremony, through land stewardship, science, art, and in everyday acts of practical reverence. Miigwech. Miigwech is thank you. So this ends the presentation, and we'll have a discussion now. And I'd love to listen to anybody who's read the book and any contributions anyone would like to make. The quote that's down at the bottom is a quote that I could probably put in the chat, but it's sorry, not a quote. It's a link that allows you to look at native lands that you are actually living on. Because as we know, the land that we live on now is actually, it was Native American land. It was where the natives lived. And there's this link allows you to see all where they originally lived. So what land are you living on? And it gives you the chance to get to know that tribe or nation, and what was their culture like. So I'd like to thank everyone for coming, and we can open it up for discussion.
Ananya, the honorable harvest section of the book in which you were speaking to, and all the R's, the reciprocity, the respect, recognition, and reflection. That's really powerful. And it reminded me of another book, and I'm trying to find it. It was written by Oren Lyons, who was a chief of the Haudenosaunee, I can't even say it now, of the Mohawks. There we go, Haudenosaunee. And he talked about that a lot. He talked about the thing that resonated with me was the same thing that Robin talks about, which is he talked about going out hunting with some people, and he and his brother were taught from very young, you never take what you come across what's first, because you don't know if that's the only one, and you never take the last one of anything. And he said, and it was like, when you go hunting, he and his brother would only take one bullet or one shot. And he said, and you know, he worked as a guide, and he said he'd take these chamokmen or that's the Potawatomi word for whites, long swords. And he said they would take all these bullets, and they go, why do you need 7 bullets to go hunting? You know, one shot, one bird, that's it. You take what you need. And he goes, well, what if, you know, you learn to be good, so that when you take what you're going to take, you do it respectfully, you give thanks before and after, and you only take what you need, and you never take the last of anything. Right. And I thought that was really powerful, and it was like an adjustment in my thinking of that. You don't, it's like the Windigo that you were talking about. You don't want to be rapacious about it. You don't take more than you need. She talks about that all through the book, with the maple sugar, with harvesting everything, even sweetgrass. And when you were talking about sweetgrass baskets, we have quite a collection. So it reminded me to go get one and inhale. So it was awesome. So thank you for that reminder. I got to find that book now. It's in our shelves someplace back there.
Yeah, Robin does talk about that. She does a whole chapter on it. And I have to say that, you know, I've always been an animal lover, and if I could, I would have been born vegetarian. But it did help teach me more about the whole thing, about the whole process of hunting. You know, especially for, you know, the story he tells about, you know, he says you always, when you're young and you're taught, you realize you can communicate. There will be the one who comes and says, I'm ready. I'm giving my life. And he talks about, you know, the buck that comes and shows his shoulder, shows his neck. And I sat there and I squirmed through it, but I read it anyway. And it really, you know, because Herb's talked to me about that. He says, no, the animal knows. And I've always had a hard time with that, but to hear an elder talk about it, you know, and then she writes about it in the book. Yeah. Are there any other comments?
It's your turn, honey.
I'm
say
Richard,
who you are.
I'm Richard Selfridge. We're here in Florida. We have been members of TS for ever, yeah. And lived in Chicago and went to the facilities there routinely. And what's that?
In Wheaton.
In Wheaton, yes. And now we're elders and retired here in Florida. And both my wife and I have been very moved by the Indian teachings, and it goes way, way back. We were married by a Lakota elder many, many years ago, and out in South Dakota. And one of his predecessors was Frank Foolscrow.
Okay.
And if any of you would like to learn some more about the Lakota's ways, the books about Frank Foolscrow that have been written by Thomas Nails are some of the most powerful readings I've ever come across. And one of the things that Grandpa Foolscrow used to say, and it was resonated in some of the things that you were saying earlier, was that live your life so that every step is a prayer. And we just talked about that very subject, my wife and I, this morning, and in our gratitudes when we do a gratitude every morning before we have our morning meal, and give thanks. And we talked about that very concept. So it must have been something that needed to be shared today, because Frank Fool's Crow used to say, "Be the hollow bone, and let the Spirit work through you and come through you, and be part of the world." And so you're mentioning that really brought that subject up again to me, and I thank you for that. I enjoyed your talk very much. Well, and this is my wife, Mary Gail, here. She used to teach therapeutic touch there at the Theosophical Society.
And I've been in touch. We've been in touch.
Yes, yes. Well, I'll just comment on my husband, who is part Native American. And for those of you who knew Dora, I was single for quite some time. And one day Dora just said to me, "I'm going to come over to the house." And I said, "Oh, okay." So she sat down on the couch and she crossed her legs like she would, kicking her leg. And she said, "Well, do your kids like him?" Meaning him, because I had brought him to one of our therapeutic touch workshops. First thing she said is, "Who is that man you brought?" And I said, "Oh, he's a friend, somebody." She said, "He's a very good man." And I said, "Yeah, he seems like a nice fellow." Next week or so, she comes, like I said, to the house. And she said, "Well, do your kids like him?" And I said, "Yeah, they seem to like him." And, "Well, does he help you around the house?" And I said, "Dora, I want you to tell me whether I should pursue my PhD. She says, "Okay, small ceremony, but then you can have a big party afterwards." I said, "Are you telling me to marry him?" She says, "He's a very good man." Of course, she never said she. And I just, and then my Native American grandpa, I was adopted by the Lakota people. He said, I called him up and I said, "Grandpa, Richard wants to marry me. And I won't marry him unless you approve and unless you'll marry us." And he said, "We'll have wasna, no wedding cake." And so he did marry us. And one of the things that they say in the Native American culture is, once you're married, your souls connect forever. So not to worry about divorce, not to worry about separation, because just like the animal that comes for the hunt, so do the partners that come for us to learn the lessons here on this earth. So I'm learning lots of lessons with this fellow, and I blame it all on Dora and Grandpa Sidney. Thank you so much for your program today.
Oh,
I had just given Richard the book for Christmas, and my daughter gave him the book for Christmas. And she lives in California. We live in Florida. So then when this program came up, I thought, and he's having a harder time reading now. And I thought, how perfect that you should, bring this program to us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Can I just say something to that last statement that you made, Mary Gail? I was telling Ananya before we started that I've got several copies of the book, but I initiated an audio books program.
Oh,
and
wonderful.
I'm listening to Robin read this now. And Robin I think that would be perfect for you, because she's a wonderful speaker, and her voice is very familiar to me, but I think you'll find that the way she reads and it just, I find myself repeating chapters, which I rarely do when I'm actually reading. So I think you would enjoy that very much. So I would highly recommend that.
Thank you. That's perfect, because he likes to hear, and so do I, and we could listen together. Thank you so much.
We oftentimes, before I met Mary Gail, I used to listen to sacred Lakota songs, the ones that they would sing in the sweat lodge and at the Sundance and at all the major 7 ceremonies.
That's all my husband ever listens to is drum songs.
And when I met my wife, I asked her if I could sing a song.
I was teaching a Native American Healing the Sacred Hoop class. We're taking too much time, but this is a funny story. Go ahead.
But at any rate, I asked her during the weekend get together whether I could sing a song, and she said, "Well, sure." So I started singing. I didn't say
for sure. I said, "Well, who is this guy, and why does he go?"
And I started singing one of Fool's Crow's sacred songs, Mielo, it's called, and it's just the most beautiful song, and it's a spirit calling song. And when I finished singing it, my wife was then not my wife was sitting directly across from me, and I opened my eyes after I finished the song, and this light appeared in her third eye, and I thought, oh my, what is that? And then it traveled down to her heart level and shot literally shot a thunderbolt across the room from me and hit me in the chest physically. And I thought, oh my, who is this? Well, it ended up being my wife later on. But that's a long story how that all came about. And she was struck by lightning and the thunder beings brought her back. And I mean, it's just so incredible. All the Native American imagery and that you talked about in your—
the sacred songs.
All these different concepts are all interwoven into our story. Yeah. And anyone that really digs into it, it's their story too. And
it's all of our stories.
It's all of our stories. We're all one. In fact, the statement they make when they come in and out of the sweat lodge is Matakwe Oyesin, which means we're all related, all of us, to the earth and to the four-leggeds and the two-leggeds and the winged ones. And I've talked too much.
Well, thank you.
I'm
used to be quiet.
I've got Parkinson's now, so I've got an excuse to have. I've got a mouth that doesn't quit. Oh my.
Carol, you wanted to say something?
I do. I remember being at Still Light many years ago and having my first sample of a giveaway ceremony. And the teacher had brought 2 items. One was this very ethereal fairy with a crystal behind it, and we all wanted that. And the other one was an earth goddess made of stone and, you know, not as well formed as the fairy. And the leader played music, and whoever was holding something, they, you know, that's what you kept. So it was interesting to watch this greed. I want to talk about the greed part too, but to watch the greed of all of us wanting this particular fairy and not wanting the other one. Anyway, I got the other one. I got the earth goddess one. And I eventually became so attached to her that I had to give her away. So I understand that. And the thing that is wonderful is that teacher was Mary Gale.
Interesting.
So full circle with us being here. But I also really like this idea that this craving part of us, that we're not born with it. That I see in myself some of the ways I self-soothe that are dysfunctional. And it's kind of like we make our own teddy bear to make us feel safe. And when you were a kid and hugging a teddy bear, that's one thing, but then you get older and you start drinking and, I mean, I don't, but anyway, you know what I'm saying? We get habits, eating, compulsive video games, just to kind of numb ourselves and not be there. So I'm just wondering, I have not read the book. I do have it on Kindle. But just wondering what more she has to say with that. And are there any suggestions for how to break that pattern? I know strengthening our real self is one of the best ways to me for breaking that, is really being in touch with my authentic self.
Yeah, she does talk about her addiction to chocolate, which I think is very funny. She talks about her addiction to chocolate. She also talks about the fact that she also has to watch herself with how much she buys, because she talks about being in Mexico and, you know, all this beautiful produce there and just wanting to fill up her basket. but then realizing that she didn't really need to fill up her basket because she was the only one cooking. So she made sure that she only filled it up with what she needed, you know, and it's this whole consciousness of, do I really need that? I guess we need to keep on asking ourselves that constantly.
I think, and she also tied that to when she had to pay for it versus when it was given to her.
Right.
I thought about it a lot more actually when it was a gift, which I find really fascinating, because you think if you have to pay for it, you think about it twice, but she was thinking about it more when it was a gift.
Right, and the fact that when we live in a gift economy or a gift commodity, we tend to take things, we tend to look at it a little bit more gracefully. We hold it a little bit more gently when something is a gift to us versus if we have to pay for it. If we have to pay for it, we sort of get this thing inside of us, well, I'm paying for it, versus if something is given as a gift to us, we hold it closer to our heart. You know, when something is given to us and we don't have to necessarily give anything in return, we sort of sit there and go, oh, okay. We hold it a little closer to us.
Does she tie any of that to fear of scarcity? Because I've always felt that, you know, there's a lot of, we're natively taught so much fear, and as we're taught fear, we become having fear of scarcity. So we overcompensate by buying too much because we just, you know, we have to have more because something might happen,
right?
Rather than what we need today. You know, we eat three. You know, the symbolism you were showing of eating a third fish. You know, eating the third fish, and then the fourth and the fifth. I mean, is that just? Does she tie that in any way to native fear?
She talks about the fact that Native Americans, I mean, have always lived according to the rhythm of the earth. You know, you eat what is given, what is there. So she does talk about the fact that they've gone through, I mean, historically, imagine living on land. You eat when you have food. So you do go through periods where there's very little. I can't remember what it was that she said that they ate. I think it was.
She's talking about the maple tree, and she talks about just the seasons of the year, and that there's times of the year when there's hunger. There's even one of the months is called the season of the hunger. The hunger moon, and knowing that there at some point you'll be replenished, but that you learn to store for that hunger. And she said that talks about the trees going through that, how they store their sap and how they store their energy, and they're in tune. The sap starts running when there's cold nights and warmer days, but the trees know when to start. They're not fooled by a midwinter thaw. They know to wait, and they've stored up that energy. And just the same way that we need to store up our energy and our connections to make sure that we're properly fed throughout the year. It's like the story of the ant and the grasshopper, I guess.
But I find it interesting also with regard to this, that it's really a relatively short time in the history of humanity. We have been allowed a culture that hasn't been dependent on the very land that we live and the cycles of the seasons and everything else. Now you can drive to a grocery store in December in Chicago and fresh mangoes are coming from Brazil. You know, we've never had that type of a society before. So maybe we've lost a little bit of the touch of, you know, what our dependency on land and our dependency on nature really is.
Yeah, because if we don't, and one of the things that I always thought that was interesting was because I just had this conversation with my daughter yesterday. We were talking about when you don't have certain fruit at wintertime. So you wait, and there's this excitement when that fruit comes into fruition because you have to wait for that season, you know, but now everything is immediate. So I was sitting and thinking about how out of rhythm we are because we're eating everything from different parts of the world now, and we've got this global market. So the earth is constantly having to produce, the transportation is constantly happening, and our bodies are constantly craving. We can
mangoes.
get any time now.
Mangoes from
Yes, mangoes from Patel Brothers.
You wait for that though.
But I was thinking about this churning that goes on constantly in the poor earth, and we are so out of rhythm with the lulls and the highs. We don't do the lulls anymore. Everything is just always here. And now we've got this pandemic, and so we're in this huge lull and nobody likes it. But we sort of created this lull for ourselves, because we've been, you know, the poor earth has just been producing and producing to keep up with our consumption.
Agribusiness.
Yeah. Susan?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on what you were just saying. And also Barbara Kingsolver has written about that. Yep. And how, you know, we need to shop farmers markets and grow our own, and think about that because of the cost to the planet of the airplanes and the trucks and the trains that are, you know, spending natural resources to bring us mangoes when we're not supposed to have them. But not just for that reason, because our bodies are meant to eat what is in season when it's in season. We're not supposed to have watermelon in the middle of winter, you know, and it's not only that we enjoy it when it comes into season more, having not had it all year, but our body will benefit from it in ways that it won't at the wrong time of year. So we really want to think about that. And also the conversation has led me to remember Copper Woman, and Anne Cameron wrote that book, Copper Woman, which I read so many times and just loved. I mean, even now I want to go and find it, see if I even still have it. I probably don't. I've had 6 copies of Braiding Sweetgrass. I just keep giving them away. I've never finished the book because I keep giving it away before before I finish it. I'm short a book at the moment, but I might go get the audio because I'd love to hear her read it herself. So anyway, thank you very much for offering this class for us today. It's been lovely to share in this way with all of you. Thank you.
Thanks for coming. Are there any other comments? Oh, Diane?
Hi. I read the book many years ago, and one of the things that I remembered from it was a story about when the first settlers came from Europe, and the native people were teaching them how to harvest the grain from the rivers, or from the waterways, the wild rice, I guess it was. Right. And they would throw some back into the water, and the settlers were just shocked at that, and they would say things like, "Oh, these stupid people, you know, they're not taking it all, and why are they throwing it back?" And I'm just thinking, yeah, they just didn't get it. And then so generations later, it's like we're still not getting it. Yeah. So that's why books like this and other ones that you've mentioned, I've been jotting down the names, are just so helpful to get us back where we need to be. Yeah. So thank you for this beautiful, beautiful reminder. Thank you.
Well, thank you for coming.
I was wondering what that author of Copper Woman was. Was it Anne Cameron? Is that what you said? would have been, was it Sue? Ann Cameron?
Susan, are you still there?
Maybe she's gone.
Oh. Mary Gail?
I'll look it up.
Appreciate that, because it sounds like a book I'd like.
I'm still here. I had to check a message that just came in, but what was the question?
About Copper Woman. It's by Ann Cameron. Is that
Ann Cameron? Yeah.
Okay.
What was that? I'm sorry.
Ann
Cameron.
Cameron.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful book. I have to read it again now that I remembered it. Beautiful book.
Thank you.
Can I also suggest that if you enjoyed Braiding Sweetgrass, you enjoy her. She's coming out with a third book, but her other book was Gathering Moss. She's an ethnobotanist. Robin was talking about. She's an ethnobotanist, and mosses are her passion. And so her original book was Gathering Moss, and I find the book particularly appealing to me because I know her family, and her father actually did the illustrations for that book. Wow. But she talks mostly in that book about learning to look for the minute, to really pay attention to the little things, and there's nothing that Robin or her sister Barbara writes that doesn't speak to your heart. But I think if you enjoyed Braiding Sweetgrass, it's not a fast moving book, but it speaks to you in depth, and I highly recommend it.
Richard, 1 second. Alice, did you have a question?
Sorry, I'm out somehow.
You're out somehow?
Yeah, so I lost my screen. Sorry, just go on now. I'm trying to come back.
Oh, okay. We can see you.
We see you.
Oh, can you see me? Really? I have to be careful then. I'm looking at a big screen but don't see anything. I'm sorry. I just wanted to say that as a European, I'm from Holland. So I'm very interested in hearing you talking like this. So it's complete different background, different roots.
Yes.
And yeah, I think it's very promising for me that you're here, that you're talking like this now. But I really like to come in first before I speak further. You go on, that's okay. Sorry.
Okay. Well, 1 second. Richard and then Carol.
Okay, yes, thank you. Just one quick interjection here. I know all of us have had a most difficult COVID 2020 year, and it despite all of the angst and pressure that it created on all of us, for me, it was a joyous year. In one respect, I've learned to garden and compost and watch how things turn from season to season like I've never done before. I've always had a green thumb, but I've never really worked it through the year like I have this last year during COVID. And the idea about sustainability that we've talked about today, and connection with the plant world and the garden fairies, they're all there. And I'm just so grateful that despite all of the troubles that year brought, it brought me to gardening. And if you haven't tried it, I have to say it's wonderful. So that's all.
Yeah, that's interesting that you bring up that point. She talks about the fact that she taught her children gardening, and she asks the question, do you think that your garden loves you?
Oh, yes.
We know you love your garden, but do you think your garden loves you? And her daughter, without hesitation, says, definitely. They talk to me all the time. My garden, I know my garden loves me.
Definitely.
Well,
definitely.
I just want to interject that here in Florida, it's very hard to grow tomatoes because it's so hot. And as soon as Richard started gardening, I said, John Abbenhouse always told me, talk to the garden fairies and divas, and they will come and help you. And we had so many tomatoes that we had to keep giving them away. I mean,
it's been a constant giveaway for you.
Yeah.
It's been wonderful.
They've just been producing and producing. So it's very true. Once you start loving your garden, it loves you back. Yeah. And thank you again. It's so nice to see everyone. And it's so lovely to be reconnected with my loved ones.
Like-minded people.
At Theosophical Society.
Yeah. Yes, it is.
Welcome. Carol?
Yes, just thinking about I've studied more Peruvian shamanism and the idea of Aini, which is right relationship, which is really what we're talking about, that it's with people, it's with the planet, it's with everything. I mean, it's really what you've been exemplifying. So in that tradition, if you're a healer, I mean, you had said like you wouldn't charge for a sweat, there shouldn't be money for that. But in the native culture, if you don't have some kind of exchange, then they're beholding to you, and that you don't want to create something like that. So now they may give them an egg or a chicken or, for healing, but there is some kind of exchange going on. So I'm just curious, because I've seen it with Theosophy that we're not supposed to charge for things. And it does make a bit of an uneven, I'm the healer, you're the patient kind of dynamic in those kinds of situations.
But I do wonder if that is more of a Western way of looking at something, because if you're given something by someone, there's always going to be a return. If you live in reciprocity, there will always be a return. There's no scale sitting there going, okay, well, you've given more, so I need to give back, and that kind of thing. And I learned that from Herb and Elaine. I mean, it's been really quite a great teaching for me, is to never feel that I have to give something back. We give back whether we know it or not. I mean, Herb will come to do ceremony at my house, but my gift is my house. I'm giving the land to them and so forth. And I never think about it. So one of the things that I was talking about with regard to ceremony is when we have these people who charge hundreds of thousands of dollars, which is completely, I mean, that's just not done. And
no, I understand that. I have someone that's having a house cleaning before she moves in, and they want $3,000.
Yeah,
and I just think that makes no sense. That's just ends up being greeds. I also think maybe the practice of Aini for I don't know, say beginners, or for say people who aren't used to that, it may need to be very physical and technical. I give you this, you give me that. And as time goes on, that it probably just gets its own flow, because our intention is to be in balance and to be part of the flow.
Correct.
And so I understand what you're saying. I think, but I think there is value in the actual practice of it also. Not to the extremes like you were talking about, like that you're ripping people off.
Yeah.
Can I add something?
Yeah.
It just brings to mind when we were growing up. I had 3 younger brothers, and the oldest of them always felt that he should have been the eldest. But whenever you gave him a gift, he always wanted to know exactly how much you paid for it. So when he gave you a gift or whatever in return, it was exactly the same price. And that always just struck me as, it just felt bizarre to me to do that, to put that kind of monetary value on something. And that's why when Ananya was talking about, you may not get something in return from that person, but just holding a sweat lodge, you get as much out of it as you put in. And that's true of the person leading the sweat as it is for everybody in the lodge. So it's a gift to be able to participate regardless of your role in the lodge. And that's part of it. But I think when we look for reciprocity to come from a specific individual, maybe I gave you a gift, so now I'm expecting something in return from you. I don't think that's how it works. Well, to me, that's not how it works. You're going to get something back, and it may be totally unexpected or surprise, or come from somebody completely different. It doesn't have to come from that person.
Too much. Okay.
Jason, did you want to say something?
No.
I'm going to have to drop.
Oh, okay.
You are going to stay on as the audio. Speaking of gardens, I have to go tend mine.
Good for you.
Make me a co-host.
You are co-host. So
okay.
So you'll have the reins as soon as I'm gone. Thank you for doing this, Ananya. It was wonderful. Thank you all. I love seeing you all. Some of you I've seen in many years. So
yes, yes.
Very nice.
Well, and we'll see you next month.
Okay. Yeah, Jason will be doing The Hidden Life of Trees on June 12th.
Oh, wonderful.
Yes,
I love that.
I love that.
Yeah, I will definitely love that. Yeah.
Love it.
Please join. Hopefully I can do 1/10 of what's been done.
Trying to fight you, tongue.
Oh, stop it.
Okay, bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you so much.
I'm going to.
Okay.
I would just like to comment on the culture we live in, the Western culture has a difficult time receiving, not only in giving, but they have a hard time in receiving. I've found that when I give, people say, oh, you don't have to do that, or you shouldn't have done that, or I didn't expect you to do that. And I think one of the ways that I've handled that was just to say, the gift you can give me is just to say thank you. Mm-hmm. And most people just kind of like, well, thank you. Well, thank you. And I say, that's all. That's it. Because you're right. We give it, as we give it, we're getting it back immediately. Yeah. It's an energy exchange, isn't it? It's all about energy. Yeah. The beauty of exchange and love and support and caring.
And I think one of the places where I've heard it, and I say it daily in a prayer, is the prayer of St. Francis. And in that prayer, when towards the end, when it says, and I may be getting it wrong here because my Parkinson's memory isn't what it used to be, but it is in the giving that we receive.
That's right.
And because in that giving, we become one with Spirit. And to me, that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
When you can give and don't expect anything in exchange, and be part of that circle of sharing, that creates a spiritual realm to the whole business.
That's it.
Yeah, that's how I see it. And it's captured in just a few words in that same. Yeah, I've talked too much today. Sorry.
No, that's okay.
We both do. We fight over our words. Who's going to talk next? Thank you, Annie. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much today.
Yeah, so we're gonna wrap this up because we've been on for about 15 minutes. I want to respect everybody's time and their Saturday. So
yeah, thank you so much.
Are there any other comments or questions?
It's lovely to see you all again.
Yes, it's good to see you as well. Thank you so much for attending, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you much. Yeah, I wanted to say that it has been very, very interesting for me. I'm reading the book still. It's such a big thing. And I found it in Spanish, so it's much easier.
Ah, wonderful.
Yeah, it's much easier. I would like to have more words to explain what I feel, but at least I can say thank you, and I will meet you next month.
Okay.
Bye, con Dios.
Thank you so much.
Gracias. Lo mismo.
Bye.
Have a good afternoon.
Nanya, I have a question that what we're going to discuss next week, The Hidden Life of Trees. I might like to find that book. Do you know who wrote it?
Yes.
I do.
Wallenbach.
Paul Wolbelin.
Wallenbach?
Richard, do you have that tree book close by that you can?
Yeah, Jason.
Yeah, they're looking for the author.
Okay. Let me see.
Oh, there we
I
go.
try to read it before we meet again.
WOHLLEBEN.
Yes.
Okay, slowly.
Can you see it here? Oh, yours is bigger.
WOLLENBACH.
LLBEN.
Okay.
It's a wonderful book. Wonderful book.
And he's all over YouTube right now. He's been interviewed and so forth because he's the one that started talking about how trees were talking to each other.
Mm-hmm.
And he got a lot of backlash from it. People thought he was absolutely nuts. And now they're finding out scientifically that actually trees are talking to each other.
Yes,
yeah, that bestseller by this DeKalb author, Richard Powers, The Cover Story.
It
talked
the
about
understory?
The cover story.
Oh,
yeah. The overstory.
The overstory. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah.
Right.
The overstory. And that book talked about that too.
Right.
There's another one that I just finished reading. It's called American Canopy. I just gave it to Kathleen, which is a very Western perspective of it, but it's an alarming book. I found it very disturbing because it talked about how this culture, the prevalent culture now, has been very Windigo about, very rapacious about using up our natural resources. And he talks about how really this country is built on wood, and
yes.
and how we exhausted the resources in the Northwest, and then we moved to the Southeast, in the Northeast, and then Southeast, and how we just moved around the country, and how wasteful our practices have been in using lumber. It's an alarming book, but very eye-opening. American Canopy. And it's Eric, and I can't remember his last name. Let me look it up.
Well, people are waking up, so that's the next thing with the whole green movement.
That's right. They are.
There is hope.
There's always hope. The
His name
seventh
is
generation. Get ready for the seventh generation.
Yeah.
My grandson is teaching me now. I sit quietly on FaceTime, grateful for my ability to see him in California, and I listen. I don't have to teach because he said to me a couple of months ago, Nana, you're very, very old. I said, I knew it was I should get a facelift. No, he said, Nana, you're very, very old. I said, yes, I am. He said, but I don't think you're going back to the source soon. I said, what? He said, you won't be going back to the source soon. I said, oh, I'm very glad to know that, Robert. And he said, but don't worry. When you do, it'll be fine. Then he went about showing me a stuffy or something. But he comes up every once in a while with these little snippets of incredible wisdom. And I think they are aware of the trees dancing and talking. They are more aware. We are when we're young, and then we get caught up. And I know that there's hope. We never give up hope. So as long as the SP has continued on all this time, I ask everybody to keep our Tim Boyd and our people in India in prayer, and send them good healing energy as they face the COVID tragedy. And I thank you all so much for being here today. And I say namaste and goodbye.
Okay. Any other comments?
Nanya, how is your family in India? I've been thinking a lot about them and other friends who have family there.
Everybody seems to be doing fine. The vaccine is a bit of a problem, but everybody in my family's been vaccinated. So, yeah, I think it's really more of the poorer people that are suffering the most because
300,000 a day.
Yeah,
that's unbelievable. It just breaks my heart.
Yeah.
So I'm sending them good healing energy and hope that everybody continues to stay safe and well.
Well,
so,
thank you. Thank you.
Miigwech, terima kasih, dhanyavad. This is I'm looking forward to next month already and the end of the month to see you in person.
Yes, I'll be home soon.
Yay.
All right, everyone. Well, please take care.
Ciao.
All right, ciao. Mwah.
Bye. Thank you.
Fine. Thank you.